Have you ever felt scared when you were home alone? Sometimes the silence of your home can be the biggest nightmare. Strange noises, shadows passing by the window, knocking at the door in the middle of the night. All of these can be the beginning of a nightmare. Stay until the end because these stories may make you think twice about sleeping alone. Story 1. A terrifying encounter in Sydney. When I was 15 and living in Sydney, Australia, I had an experience that still haunts me. It was around 9 p.m. and I had just gotten out of the shower when I heard a dog barking furiously at the front gate. Looking out the window, I saw a shadowy figure dash across the porch and into our backyard. The person was hunched over, had a sickly pale complexion, was dressed entirely in black, and had long, messy black hair that partially covered his face. Ring into the living room, trying to figure out what was going on while my dog continued to growl at the front door. Realizing that the man had not left the backyard, I knew he was still lurking somewhere. A short while later, another man appeared on our porch, looking much more normal. He approached the security barrier and asked if I had seen his friend, saying that the one in the backyard was someone he had been following because he suspected him of being on drugs and dangerous. This struck me as odd since he had initially referred to the person as his friend. I became increasingly uneasy as the man walked toward my backyard, saying he was going to check on his friend. I knew there was a back door, but it was guarded by bars and locked. After a few tense minutes, the normal-looking guy returned with the pale man, who was now pacing nervously. The first man asked if I could unlock the door and come out to prove that I was harmless. The pale man stared at me with an unsettling intensity that made my chest tighten with fear. I didn't respond verbally, but instead walked over and closed the door. Suddenly, the first man lunged at me, thrusting his hand through the bars. I slammed the door shut and bolted it, then immediately called my parents, who contacted the police. When the police arrived, the two men were gone. The police informed me that there had been a break-in nearby just an hour earlier. Thinking back on it, I realized that the first man had probably been scouting the backyard for a way in, and the second man had come to us. Their intentions were clear. They weren't deterred by my presence in the house. They wanted to lure me out or break in. This realization made me extremely confused and wary of being home alone. Story 2. The intruder masquerading as mom. One night, while my mother was working a late shift at the hospital and my two brothers were away at college, I was home alone. After hanging out with some friends and watching a baseball game, they left through the back door. I cleaned up and went to bed, but just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard light footsteps coming up the stairs outside my room. I assumed it was my mother coming home. I even heard her cough as she passed my bedroom door and went to the bathroom. Soon after, I heard noises from the kitchen, and feeling too lazy to get up, I texted my mother to keep quiet. A moment later, I heard footsteps coming back upstairs. My bedroom door opened, and I saw a figure resembling my mother standing in the door. I asked her to stop making so much noise. She didn't respond. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my mom saying she was still at work. Panic set in as I realized it wasn't my mom at the door. I tried to act calm, pretending not to suspect anything, and told her to leave me alone so I could sleep. The person remained silent, which made my heart race. I texted my mom in a panic, asking her to call the police. The figure at my door suddenly began to mumble in a hoarse, raspy voice, repeating, "Nowhere to go." She advanced toward my bed with her arms outstretched, and I yelled, come back as I fumbled to turn on the light. The light fell on an old woman with stiff white hair and wild eyes. She kept saying louder and louder, "Nowhere to go." Terrified, I jumped out of bed, ran out of the room, and held the door as she tried to push it open, screaming that she needed to get out. My mother kept calling, but I couldn't answer. It wasn't until the police came and knocked on the front door that I let go and ran to them. The old woman rushed after me, but the police pinned her against the wall and arrested her. The police later determined that the woman was mentally ill. She had wandered into my house through the back door, which I had forgotten to lock after my friends left. The traumatic experience left me scarred, and now I double-check every lock before going to bed, always alert to any noises at night. Story 3. Trespassers on a rural farm. Before I moved to California, I lived on my dad's farm in rural Colorado. It was a large, beautiful property, but living in such a remote area always felt a little creepy. Over the years, we had a number of trespassers, which led my dad to keep 3 guns for protection. On one occasion, he even had to use a rifle to chase 2 men away. One hot June night, while my parents were on vacation and my younger brother was out, I was home alone. It was around 1 a.m., and I was watching TV in the living room when the motion sensor porch light turned on. Thinking my brother was home, I checked outside but saw no one. I called my brother, but he didn't answer. Then there was a loud knock on the front door. Our door had a peephole, and I cautiously looked through it, but saw no one. Thinking it might be kids playing a prank, I closed the blinds, growing increasingly paranoid. Suddenly, a loud knock came from the living room window, followed by 2 voices, one deep and male, the other high-pitched and female, saying, "We saw you." My heart was pounding as I hoped it was just my brother and his girlfriend teasing me. The knocking continued, now at the dining room window, where the blinds were still open. I could see 2 figures but couldn't make out their faces. Panicking, I ran upstairs to get one of my dad's guns. With the rifle in hand, I felt braver. I checked the windows again, but the numbers were gone. Determined to confront the intruders, I went outside, walked around the house, and checked the livestock. Everything seemed normal, so I went back inside, checking all the doors again before going to bed. About half an hour later, I was awakened by frantic pounding on the door and a man shouting incoherently. I grabbed my rifle, opened the window, and fired a shot into the night. The shouting and pounding stopped immediately, and I heard footsteps running away. Nothing else happened that night or for the next few months until I moved out. The next day, I told my dad what had happened, and he was proud of me for protecting the property. The experience reinforced my belief in the importance of having a means of protection in such a remote area. Story 4. The Persistent Stalker. One spring night, home alone, I was on a FaceTime call with my friend Jordan. I was pacing my room when I saw a man standing on the street, staring up at my window. I tried to point him out to Jordan, but she couldn't see him clearly. She suggested I call my parents, so I hung up and called my mom. It was around midnight, and I woke her up. She told me to turn off the lights and close the blinds, hoping the man would go away. Following her advice, I closed the blinds and turned off the lights. After a few minutes, curiosity got the better of me, and I looked outside. The man was closer now, standing on the sidewalk, still staring at my window. Panicked, I called the police. The operator asked if the man was armed, but I didn't know. She advised me to call back if he entered my house and assured me that a patrol car would be by soon. I called Jordan back and stayed on FaceTime, while waiting for the patrol car. Eventually, I saw a police car drive by and scan the area with its headlights. Relieved, I ended the call with Jordan and went to bed, assuming the man was gone. About 20 minutes later, I heard a creaking noise outside. I looked out the window but saw nothing. After a while, the noise got louder. To my horror, I saw a figure at the window. I had an upstairs bedroom, and I realized that he had climbed up the side of my house. Frightened, I ran to another window and screamed for help, hoping that my neighbors would hear. I called 911 again, frantically explaining the situation. The man tried to get through the window but stopped when one of my neighbors yelled something. He jumped out and ran away. The police arrived shortly after, and I explained everything. They assured me that they would patrol the area throughout the night. Although the man was scared away, I could not sleep that night, constantly worried. This incident made me extremely cautious, always making sure my windows and doors were locked and being extremely aware of my surroundings. Story 5. The Night of the Intruder. When I was 14, I had an experience that still sends chills down my spine. It was a normal night, around 9 p.m., and I was babysitting my little cousin at her house. My mom and aunt were out shopping, while my dad and uncle were at the movie. We were sitting in the living room, watching TV, but I couldn't shake this strange, uneasy feeling. Something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Trying to calm myself, I got up to check the back door and lock it. When I walked back through the kitchen, my heart almost stopped. There, staring at the window, was an old, homeless-looking man. His eyes were fixed on my cousin, and a fierce protective instinct kicked. I pretended not to see him and told my cousin it was time for bed, saying that our parents would be home soon and they didn't want him to stay up late. After putting my cousin to bed, I knew I had to prepare for the worst. I weighed about 125 pounds at the time and was 5'8" and played college football, so I wasn't completely helpless. I went back downstairs, went straight to the kitchen, and grabbed a meat tenderizer. I turned back to the window and saw that the man was gone. Panicked, the illustrator ran to the front door to check the lock. Both the deadbolt and the knob were locked. Gripping the hammer, I rushed upstairs to my cousin's room and stood in front of the door. When my cousin asked me what I was doing, I assured him that everything was fine, urging him to calm down and keep his head down. I called the police, then my dad and uncle. The police said they would be there in half an hour, but my dad and uncle were 45 minutes away. Suddenly, I heard the unmistakable sound of a window shattering, followed by the heavy thud of boots on the main floor. My heart pounded in my chest as I told my cousin to stay under the covers and be quiet. The intruder's footsteps echoed throughout the house, and terror gripped me as I heard him moving upstairs. He checked each room, my aunt and uncle's bedroom, the bathroom, before returning downstairs and opening the basement door. 15 agonizing minutes later, the police finally arrived and stormed into the house. They found the man in the basement. It turned out he had escaped from a mental hospital a county away. The encounter was terrifying, but we were safe thanks to the timely intervention of the police. That night forever changed my perception of safety, and I will never forget the fear of facing an intruder while trying to protect my cousin.